Ash and Root, The Golden Thread. Season 1, Episode 3. The Fire Remembers. The Hall of Living Memories. Morning did not arrive all at once. It unfolded gently across the first forest, like an old storyteller taking time with the opening lines of a beloved tale. Mist drifted lazily between colossal trunks older than kingdoms. Dew gathered upon emerald ferns whose ancestors had watched continents change their names. Shafts of golden sunlight pierced the canopy in quiet columns, illuminating countless tiny insects that floated through the air like living constellations. The forest awakened without hurry. No bells rang. No horns announced the dawn. The first forest had never needed such things. Its heartbeat was enough. Deep beneath miles of ancient roots, the golden seed pulsed once. Across the forest, flowers opened. Birds lifted into the morning sky. Streams quickened their gentle songs. The living world greeted another day. Root had already been awake for hours. Sleep had become a different thing since the thread chose her. Dreams no longer belonged entirely to her. Sometimes she walked beside rivers that no longer existed. Sometimes she heard languages spoken by voices long returned to the earth. Sometimes she dreamed of a young man standing upon black mountains beneath falling embers. She never saw his face clearly. Yet she always woke carrying the strange certainty that somewhere he had dreamed of her as well. She climbed the winding trail toward the first tree. Morning light painted the immense trunk with rivers of molten gold. Thousands of birds nested among branches so vast they disappeared into the clouds. Great stags grazed peacefully beneath roots larger than castles. The air itself carried an almost musical stillness. Naya waited where she always seemed to wait. Hands folded calmly behind her back. Silver locks shimmering softly beneath the morning sun. You came early. Root smiled. I couldn't sleep. Naya laughed quietly. The thread rarely allows its keepers much rest. Together they entered a narrow passage hidden beneath one of the first tree's colossal roots. The entrance had not been there yesterday. Or perhaps, Root simply hadn't been able to see it. The passage curved gently downward. The deeper they walked, the cooler the air became. Crystal formations emerged from the walls, glowing with soft golden light that required no flame. The tunnel widened, then widened again, until Root stepped into a chamber so vast she instinctively stopped walking. The Hall of Living Memories. It stretched farther than sight itself. Towering shelves carved directly into living roots spiraled upward like impossible cathedrals. Yet they held no books. Instead, millions of tiny strands of golden light floated through the air. Each thread shimmered with its own unique rhythm. Some glowed brightly. Others flickered softly. Some were no larger than spider silk. Others shone like rivers beneath sunlight. The entire hall breathed with quiet life. Root whispered, "What is all this?" Naya's answer came with unmistakable reverence. "Humanity." Root frowned. "There aren't any people." "There are." Naya smiled gently. "You simply expected flesh instead of memory." She reached toward one delicate strand drifting nearby. The instant her fingertips brushed it, the air filled with laughter. A young father spun his daughter around beneath an apple tree. The little girl shrieked with delight as blossoms rained around them. The moment lasted only seconds. Then both figures dissolved into golden light once more. The strand drifted peacefully back into place. Root stared silently. "Who are they?" "I don't know," Naya replied. "And I don't need to. They loved. They were remembered. That is enough." They continued walking through the endless hall. Every few steps another thread awakened. An old woman quietly mending a stranger's coat before winter. Two brothers rebuilding a bridge destroyed by floods. A physician remaining beside a dying patient long after everyone else had gone home. A musician calming frightened children during a terrible storm. No kings. No conquerors. No legends. Only ordinary people choosing kindness. Again. And again. Across thousands of years. Root felt tears gathering unexpectedly. I thought history belonged to great people. Naya stopped beside one particularly brilliant thread. History remembers rulers. The thread remembers hearts. There is a difference. At the center of the hall stood something unlike anything Root had ever seen. An enormous loom. Its frame had grown directly from the living roots of the first tree. Golden threads stretched endlessly across it. Some newly woven. Others impossibly ancient. The loom worked without hands. Every heartbeat. Another strand quietly joined the tapestry. Root approached carefully. It's weaving itself. No. Naya corrected softly. The world is. She rested one hand upon the ancient wood. Every promise kept. A new thread appeared. Every act of mercy. Another joined it. Every sacrifice made for love rather than pride. The tapestry brightened. Root watched in awe, then noticed something else. Dark places. Tiny tears. Sections where the weaving had begun to unravel. Her smile disappeared. What happened there? Naya's expression became solemn. Broken promises. Forgotten names. Betrayed trust. The empty cannot weave. It can only unravel. Silence settled between them. Finally, Root asked the question she had carried since accepting the thread. Can we repair it? Naya looked toward the endless tapestry stretching beyond sight. Not alone. Root followed her gaze. The golden threads shimmered gently beneath the living roots. Somewhere beyond mountains. Beyond kingdoms. Beyond every road she had ever walked. Another keeper had begun awakening. Naya smiled. The thread chose two for a reason. Far away. High upon the broken range. Ash stood before the ancient forge of embers. Without understanding why, he placed his hand against warm stone at precisely the same moment Root touched the living loom. The golden thread trembled. The first flame answered. Neither spoke. Neither saw the other. Yet both felt the same unmistakable certainty. Someone else had just taken the next step beside them. And the oldest story in the world quietly continued. The Forge of Embers. Fire has always been misunderstood. People remember the forests it consumed, the homes it reduced to ash, the wars fought beneath skies stained orange by its fury. Few remember the first fire, the one that warmed freezing hands, cooked the first meal shared between strangers, kept predators beyond the circle of light while children slept peacefully beneath unfamiliar stars. Fire had never wished to become a weapon. It had only wished to become warmth. The broken range stretched across the western horizon like the spine of a sleeping giant. Granite cliffs disappeared into drifting clouds. Waterfalls plunged into valleys where few people dared travel. The mountains possessed a silence unlike the first forest. The forest whispered. The mountains listened. Ash climbed alone. His boots scraped against ancient stone polished smooth by countless seasons of rain. The golden ember now resting beneath the skin of his right hand pulsed softly with every heartbeat. Not painfully. Patiently. Like something waiting for him to ask the right question. He stopped beside a cliff overlooking miles of rugged wilderness. I don't know what you want from me. The wind answered first. Then, the mountain itself. A low vibration rolled beneath his feet. Not violent. Familiar. Like recognizing the footsteps of an old friend. The cliff slowly opened. Stone separated without cracking. An ancient staircase emerged from the mountain itself. Each step glowed faintly beneath layers of volcanic glass. Ash stared in disbelief. No one is going to believe this. A warm breeze carrying the scent of cedar smoke drifted upward. The mountain seemed almost amused. He smiled. I suppose that's an invitation. The staircase descended deep into the earth. With every step, daylight faded. Golden light replaced it. Not from torches. Not from crystal. The walls themselves glowed from within, veins of molten gold running through the stone like rivers beneath translucent skin. Ash reached the bottom. The chamber before him stole every remaining thought from his mind. The Forge of Embers. It was enormous. Far larger than any palace he had ever imagined. Ancient anvils stood beneath vaulted ceilings carved directly into the mountain. Hundreds of hammers rested neatly upon stone benches exactly where their owners had left them. Massive furnaces lined the walls. Cold. Silent. Waiting. Everything appeared untouched. Not abandoned. Preserved. As though the craftsman had simply stepped outside moments earlier. The air smelled of iron, charcoal, fresh rain, and warm bread. Ash frowned. Warm bread? The scent reminded him of childhood, of mornings before loss, of his mother's laughter echoing through a small stone kitchen. The forge remembered. He walked slowly between the silent workstations. Every tool seemed perfectly balanced, perfectly cared for. A blacksmith's hammer rested beside a half-finished lantern. Another beside an unfinished plow. Not a single sword. Not one spear. No weapons. Only tools created to build. To heal. To harvest. To illuminate. A deep voice echoed gently through the chamber. What people create reveals what they worship. Ash turned sharply. Who's there? Silence. Then, the nearest furnace awakened. Golden fire blossomed without smoke. Its flames moved unlike ordinary fire. Slowly. Gracefully. Almost thoughtfully. The voice returned. We forged homes. Another furnace awakened. Bridges. Another. Musical instruments. Another. Cradles. The final furnace roared to life. Never chains. Ash approached cautiously. The flames leaned toward him. Not threatening. Curious. He extended one trembling hand. The fire wrapped gently around his fingers. Warm. Comforting. Alive. Images flooded his mind. He saw thousands of craftsmen working together. People of every skin tone. Every age. Laughing while creating things that helped complete strangers. No one asked who deserved kindness. They simply built it. The vision changed. Kings arrived demanding weapons. The master smiths refused. Some were imprisoned. Others executed. Still they refused. The forge closed its doors rather than betray its purpose. Ash felt tears running unnoticed down his face. They died. The fire answered. No. He frowned. They finished. A single ember drifted upward. It circled Ash once before settling into his open palm. The voice spoke again. Power without compassion becomes conquest. Compassion without courage becomes surrender. The flame requires both. Ash closed his fingers around the ember. Golden light spread across his arm. Not burning. Remembering. He understood. His gift was never meant to destroy. It existed to preserve what deserved another chance. Miles away, Ruth sat quietly before the loom of living memories. Naya handed her a single loose strand of golden light. It has broken. Root studied it carefully. It feels sad. Naya nodded. It belonged to a promise. Can I repair it? The keeper smiled gently. Try. Root carefully brought the broken ends together. Nothing happened. Again. Nothing. Frustration crept into her voice. I'm doing exactly what you showed me. No. Naya whispered. You're trying to force it. The thread cannot be commanded. It must be understood. Root closed her eyes. She stopped thinking about repairing the thread. Instead, she thought about the two people who had once trusted one another enough to make it. She imagined forgiveness, patience, hope. The broken strand slowly drifted together. Golden light flowed naturally across the seam. Whole once more. Root opened her eyes in astonishment. I didn't fix it. Naya smiled. No. You remembered why it existed. Far above them both. Beyond forests. Beyond mountains. Beyond kingdoms. Two tiny lights appeared in the night sky. One golden. One ember red. They circled each other briefly before drifting apart once more. The stars themselves seemed to acknowledge the ancient reunion. Hidden within the hollow court, Kael looked upward. For the first time in centuries, hope frightened him. Because somewhere beneath that same sky, two ordinary young people were becoming everything he had once believed the world could still be. And deep inside the silence he had carried for 1,000 years, one forgotten memory whispered his true name. Kael. The lesson of the golden thread. There are teachers who fill their students with answers. Then there are teachers who ask questions so profound that the student is transformed simply by searching for them. Naya had never believed knowledge was something to be handed from one soul to another. Wisdom had to be discovered. Rain arrived before dawn. Not a violent storm. A gentle rain. The kind that settled quietly upon leaves before sliding into the earth, nourishing roots hidden far below. Root stood beneath the vast branches of the first tree, her face turned toward the gray morning sky. She made no effort to avoid the rain. Neither did the tree. Every drop that struck its ancient bark shimmered briefly with golden light before disappearing into the living wood. The forest drinks differently than we do. Naya's voice drifted through the rain. Root smiled. I've noticed. The river drinks the mountain. The trees drink the rain. The earth drinks the river. And what do we drink? Root thought for a long moment. She laughed. Tea? Naya laughed with her, then gently shook her head. We drink hope. They walked together through the rain until they reached a small clearing surrounded by towering beech trees. Nothing remarkable stood there. Only moss, wildflowers, fallen branches. The kind of place most travelers would pass without a second glance. Naya stopped. Tell me what you see. Root looked carefully. A clearing. What else? Flowers. What else? She frowned. Old trees. Naya remained silent. Minutes passed. Only rain filled the space between them. Finally, Root sighed. I don't know. The keeper smiled. Good. She knelt beside what appeared to be an ordinary fallen log. This tree died almost 400 years ago. Root looked at the weathered trunk. It doesn't look dead. It isn't. The old woman rested one hand upon the bark. Golden threads appeared beneath the moss. Tiny fungi glowed softly. Delicate flowers pushed through cracks in the wood. Beetles disappeared beneath loose bark carrying fragments of old leaves. A family of rabbits emerged from a hollow beneath the trunk. Birds gathered overhead. The tree stopped growing. Naya whispered. It never stopped giving. Root lowered herself beside the fallen giant. She ran her fingertips gently across the ancient bark. Warm. Again. Everything in the first forest seemed warm. She closed her eyes. For the first time, she heard the tree. Not words. Memories. It remembered sunlight. Thunderstorms. Children climbing its branches centuries ago. Birds building nests every spring. A lonely traveler sleeping safely beneath its shade. Even now, long after its towering crown had fallen, it remembered serving life. A single tear rolled down Root's cheek. It's happy. Naya nodded. Purpose outlives breath. The keeper reached into her satchel. She removed 2 lengths of golden thread. One whole. One broken. Repair them. Root accepted both carefully. She had succeeded once before. Surely she could do it again. She focused. Concentrated. Imagined compassion. Nothing happened. She tried harder. Still nothing. Frustration crept across her face. It worked before. Why won't it work now? Naya calmly asked. Why are you repairing it? So it becomes whole. No. So I succeed. No. So. Root stopped speaking. The answer slowly revealed itself. She wasn't repairing thread. She was restoring connection. She thought of the lonely fisherman, the baker, the shepherd, the little girl carving birds for Ash. She thought of Kael, standing helplessly inside the memory garden, unable to remember the woman he had loved. Her heart broke for him, not because he deserved pity, because no one deserved such emptiness. The thread awakened. Golden light flowed gently between the broken ends. The seam disappeared. Perfect. Whole. Alive. Naya smiled proudly. There. You've begun to understand. Root looked down at the restored strand. It responds to love. No. The keeper corrected gently. It responds to truth. Love simply happens to be one of the oldest truths. Far away. Ash knelt beside an injured mountain wolf caught beneath a fallen pine. The animal bared its teeth. Pain made even gentle creatures dangerous. Ash approached slowly. It's all right. The wolf growled. He sat several feet away instead of moving closer. Minutes passed. Rain fell steadily around them. Finally, the wolf stopped growling. Ash carefully lifted the heavy trunk. The animal limped free. Its leg was badly wounded. Ash placed one glowing hand gently upon the injury. Golden warmth spread beneath the fur. Not healing instantly. Simply easing the pain. The wolf looked into his eyes, then quietly pressed its forehead against his hand. For one brief moment, human and beast understood one another perfectly. The wolf disappeared into the trees. Ash watched it go. The first flame pulsed warmly beneath his skin. He finally understood. Power was not measured by what it could destroy, but by what it chose to protect. That evening, Kael stood alone beside a forgotten lake hidden deep within the Hollowlands. The water reflected no stars, only memories. For reasons he could not explain, one face refused to disappear. A little boy, laughing, running toward him, holding a wooden toy bird. Kael reached desperately toward the reflection. The image shattered. The lake became dark once more. He fell to one knee, breathing hard. The hollow court had taught him that forgetting brought peace. Then why did remembering hurt, and yet somehow feel more alive? Far across the world, the first tree released another golden leaf. The wind carried it west, toward the mountains, toward Ash, toward the future. The golden thread had begun doing something it had not done since the first age. It was healing, not the world, Not yet. But the people who would one day save it. The boy who forgot to laugh. There are wounds that scar the body. There are wounds that scar the heart. Then there are wounds so deep they quietly become part of the soul. Ash carried those wounds with remarkable grace. Most people never noticed. They saw a quiet young man, a hard worker, a stranger who smiled politely and left before conversations became personal. They mistook silence for peace. They were wrong. The village awoke beneath clear blue skies. Children raced barefoot through fields still wet with morning dew. Women opened market stalls overflowing with apples, herbs, and freshly baked bread. Blacksmiths hammered glowing iron while smoke curled lazily above stone chimneys. Life moved with familiar rhythm. Ash preferred mornings. People expected little from him before the day became busy. He could work, think, disappear into routine. Routine demanded nothing except effort. Effort was easier than memory. He repaired a widow's broken water wheel before sunrise. Split enough firewood for an elderly couple to last the coming week. Helped lift a collapsed stable roof after heavy rains. By midday, his hands ached. His shoulders burned. His shirt clung to him with sweat. He welcomed every discomfort. Physical pain always drowned quieter things. As he crossed the market square, someone laughed. Not at him. Near him. A little boy chased his older sister between crowded stalls, both of them laughing so hard they nearly collided with an old fruit merchant. The merchant pretended to scold them. Seconds later, he laughed too. Ash stopped walking. Something inside him tightened. He knew that sound. Not the children's voices. Laughter itself. It awakened a memory. Not complete. Only fragments. A smaller hand gripping his own. Tiny feet splashing through puddles after summer rain. Someone calling him.
Bigi Bruda.
A little brother. He gasped softly. I had. His voice disappeared. He couldn't remember the boy's face. Couldn't remember his name. Only the overwhelming certainty. That once, someone had loved him enough to call him brother. His knees weakened. He sat quietly upon the edge of an old stone fountain. Around him, life continued. No one noticed the tears gathering in his eyes. No one noticed the quiet battle unfolding behind them. The first flame pulsed beneath his skin. Warm. Steady. Almost comforting. It did not restore the memory. It simply refused to let him lose what little remained. Sometimes, hope begins by protecting a single forgotten fragment. Miles away, Root sat beside Naya beneath the first tree. Neither woman spoke. They simply listened. The wind carried thousands of sounds through the ancient forest. Water over stone. Birdsong. Branches swaying together. Roots shifting beneath the earth. Then, something new. A heartbeat. Not human. Not animal. The forest itself. Root smiled. I can hear it. Naya nodded. What does it say? Root closed her eyes. It misses someone. The keeper's expression softened. It misses many. The old woman slowly stood. Come. Today they walked farther than ever before. The forest changed around them. Trees grew older. The light dimmed beneath impossibly thick branches. The air carried the scent of cedar, moss, rain, and something else. Smoke. Not fresh. Ancient. They entered a clearing unlike any Root had yet seen. Hundreds of blackened tree stumps stretched across the landscape. The fire had happened centuries ago. Yet nothing new had grown. The earth remembered. Naya knelt quietly. This place has waited. For what? For forgiveness. Root looked around. Who burned it? The keeper took a slow breath. No one. The fire was born from grief. She placed both hands upon the scorched earth. Golden threads spread outward beneath the soil. Root followed her example. The moment her fingertips touched the ground, she saw it. The first flame. Wild. Heartbroken. Searching desperately for those it could not save. Its sorrow had become fire. Its fire had become destruction. Not from anger. From unbearable loss. The vision ended. Root opened her eyes. The flame cried. Naya nodded. Power without guidance often mistakes grief for purpose. Far beneath the broken range, the ancient forge stirred. Ash stood before the first flame once again. This time, it spoke without words. The fire rose from the furnace, slowly taking the shape of a great blacksmith. Broad shoulders, powerful hands, eyes like glowing embers. The figure lifted a hammer, not to strike, to create. Ash watched as broken iron became farming tools. Shattered chains became children's swings. Old swords became plowshares. The lesson required no explanation. Creation demanded greater strength than destruction. The first flame lowered the hammer, then looked directly into Ash's eyes. For the first time, it smiled. Night settled over both worlds. The golden thread shimmered softly beneath the stars. Root stood beneath the first tree. Ash stood outside the forge. Neither could see the other. Yet both looked toward the same moon. Both whispered different prayers. Root prayed she would become worthy of the thread. Ash prayed he would never become a weapon. The night accepted both prayers. But somewhere beyond sight, Kael listened. And for the first time in 1,000 years, he found himself praying as well. Not to the empty. Not to the hollow court. But to a memory he could no longer name. A memory that refused, despite everything, to die. The Hall of Echoes. Not every memory survives because it is strong. Some survive because someone refuses to let them disappear. The first tree understood this better than any living thing. Its roots did not merely anchor it to the earth. They reached into every age that had ever been. Every joy. Every heartbreak. Every whispered promise. Every sacrifice made when no one was watching. Nothing offered in love was ever truly lost. The tree remembered all of it. Root followed Naya deeper beneath the first tree than she had ever traveled before. The air became warmer. Not with heat, with life. The walls surrounding them were no longer stone. They were living roots, each one wider than a castle tower, slowly breathing as golden sap flowed beneath translucent bark. Thousands of tiny lights drifted between them like lazy stars. Some moved with purpose. Others lingered beside certain roots before quietly disappearing. What are they? Root whispered. Naya smiled. Echoes. Of people. Of moments. The passage finally opened into a chamber unlike anything Root had imagined. There was no ceiling. Only an endless canopy of intertwined roots stretching into darkness. The chamber itself formed a perfect circle nearly the size of a village. Pools of perfectly still water reflected memories instead of faces. Golden threads floated overhead like constellations woven into the air. In the center, a single empty chair carved from the living wood of the first tree. It was beautiful. Simple. Waiting. No one sits there. Naya said quietly. Root looked toward her. Why? Because it belongs to whoever carries the burden of remembering. Naya knelt beside one of the crystal pools. Come. Root joined her. The surface remained perfectly still. Look. I only see water. Not with your eyes. With your heart. Root closed her eyes. She slowed her breathing. The forest disappeared. The chamber disappeared. Then, the water awakened. She saw an elderly man sitting alone outside a tiny cottage. Snow drifted gently around him. His hands shook as he carved a small wooden horse. Not for himself. For a granddaughter who lived hundreds of miles away. He smiled while working, though his fingers ached. The winter bit deeply into his skin. The carving was finished. The old man wrapped it carefully in cloth. The vision faded. Root opened her eyes. He never expected anyone to know. Naya nodded. But the tree knew. Another pool shimmered. A woman stood beside a battlefield after the fighting had ended. She carried no weapon. Only a bucket of clean water. She knelt beside wounded soldiers. Not asking which kingdom they served. Not asking which flag they followed. She simply washed wounds. Held trembling hands. Closed frightened eyes. She saved many. She comforted those she could not. History forgot her name. The thread never did. Root wiped another tear from her cheek. So many ordinary people. There are no ordinary souls. Naya answered. There are only stories the world chooses to remember. And stories the tree refuses to lose. Far across the continent, Ash continued his own lessons beneath the mountains. The first flame led him into a chamber lined with hundreds of extinguished lanterns. Every lantern had once belonged to someone. A healer. A teacher. A shepherd. A mother. A poet. Ash gently picked one up. It was cold. Lifeless. What happened? The first flame answered. Hope left its keeper. Ash frowned. Can it be relit? The fire beside him brightened. Only by another. Ash slowly raised his hand. The ember beneath his skin glowed. A tiny flame touched the lantern's wick. Warm golden light blossomed gently inside. Then something remarkable happened. One lantern became 2. 2 became 5. 5 became 20. Light spread across the chamber. Not because one lantern burned brightly. Because one had shared its flame. Ash smiled quietly. I understand. The first flame seemed almost proud. Night settled over the first forest. Root emerged from beneath the great roots carrying more questions than answers. The stars glittered above the endless canopy. She looked toward the western horizon. Somewhere, a stranger walked beneath those same stars. Someone who understood loneliness. Someone learning lessons strangely similar to her own. She wondered if he also looked toward distant skies. She wondered if he ever felt less alone. Far away. Ash stood outside the Forge of Embers. He lifted his eyes toward the east. For reasons he couldn't explain. He smiled. Not because he had seen anyone. Not because he understood the feeling. Simply because hope had quietly entered his life. Without asking permission. Hidden between them. Kael watched the heavens. A single golden thread stretched across the stars. He remembered another night. Long ago. Holding a tiny hand while pointing toward those same constellations. A little voice had asked, Father, do the stars remember us? Kael closed his eyes. One tear escaped before he realized it had fallen. I hope they do. The words barely left his lips. The hollow court would have called them weakness. The first tree would have called them healing. And somewhere beneath its ancient roots, the golden thread glowed just a little brighter. The hunter without a name. There are people who lose their way. There are people who surrender their way. Then, there are those whose path is taken from them until they no longer remember they were ever walking toward the light. The hollow court called them hunters. The first tree remembered them differently. It remembered them as the lost. The wind changed. Root noticed it before anyone else. The first forest possessed countless voices. She had learned the language of rivers, the patient conversations of ancient oaks, the cheerful gossip of sparrows, the quiet prayers carried by wildflowers opening beneath dawn. Now, those voices had fallen silent, not frightened, listening. She stopped walking. Naya, the old keeper, looked toward the northern ridgeline. I know. You feel it. I remember it. Far above them, a flock of white cranes crossed the morning sky. Halfway through the valley, every bird suddenly turned east. Not one remained on its original course. The wolves emerging from their dens froze. Foxes vanished beneath tangled roots. Even the butterflies settled upon leaves, folding their wings as though trying to become invisible. The forest had sensed an intruder. Not one seeking to conquer, one seeking to erase. Naya's voice became almost inaudible. There are two kinds of hunters. Root tightened her grip on her wooden staff. I've met one. No. The keeper shook her head slowly. You met Kael. He still remembers love. What you're about to meet. Remembers nothing. Miles away. The hunter walked. No horse. No companion. No supplies. Only a charcoal cloak drifting silently behind broad shoulders. His face appeared almost impossibly calm. Not cruel. Not angry. Simply empty. He passed through villages unnoticed. Dogs never barked. Children never pointed. People looked directly at him, then immediately forgot they had done so. Memory slipped away like mist beneath morning sunlight. That was his gift. Or perhaps his curse. He reached a shallow stream. The water reflected his face. He stopped, studied the stranger staring back. Dark eyes. Strong jaw. A scar across one cheek. Nothing about the reflection awakened recognition. No childhood. No family. No laughter. No name. He touched the water. Ripples erased the reflection. He continued walking. Deep beneath the broken range, Ash was learning a different lesson. The first flame surrounded him with circles of floating embers. Each ember held a memory. A blacksmith forging a wedding ring. A grandmother lighting a lantern for children returning home after sunset. A physician boiling water before tending the wounded. The flame whispered, "Every fire begins as someone's hope." Ash watched quietly. Then another ember appeared. Different. A village consumed by flames. Smoke. Screaming. Loss. His village. He looked away. I don't want to see this. The first flame remained silent. The memory continued. For years. Ash had remembered only destruction. Now, he noticed something he had never seen before. A woman. His mother. She was not running. She was carrying children toward safety. Again. And again. Returning to the burning homes each time. Saving everyone she could. The final trip. She never returned. Ash dropped to one knee. His breathing became uneven. His voice broke. She wasn't trying to save herself. The first flame answered gently. No. She was becoming your first lesson. Back in the first forest, Root and Naya reached the northern boundary. The ancient trees ended abruptly. Beyond them stood a valley where nothing grew. No grass. No flowers. No birdsong. Only pale stones stretching toward the horizon. Root frowned. The forest won't cross. No. Naya answered quietly. It remembers. What happened here? The keeper's expression darkened. This. is where forgetting first entered the world. A single figure appeared in the distance, walking slowly toward them. His cloak moved with the wind. Everything else remained perfectly still. Root felt the golden thread tighten beneath her skin. Not with fear, with warning. The stranger stopped several yards away. His voice carried no anger, no emotion. Threadbearer. Root stepped forward. I have a name. He tilted his head. Names. The word seemed unfamiliar. After several moments, he asked quietly, What are they? Root's heart sank. He truly did not know. She answered anyway. They're gifts. They're the first thing someone gives you. The hunter looked thoughtful. I was never given one. Naya whispered. Yes, you were. The hunter frowned. A flicker. Barely noticeable. Something moved behind his eyes. Gone before it could become memory. I do not require one. No, Naya replied softly. But somewhere. Someone still remembers it. Silence. The wind moved between them. The hunter slowly raised one empty hand. Dark mist gathered around his fingertips. The air itself became colder. Not frozen. Forgotten. Flowers nearest the valley edge slowly lost their color. A nearby stream became eerily still. Root instinctively stepped forward. The golden thread erupted into brilliant light around her hand. Warm. Gentle. Alive. Not as a weapon. As a shield. The light spread across the ground like sunrise. Where it touched the fading flowers, color returned. The stream began flowing once more. Birdsong echoed cautiously through the trees. The hunter stared at the light. For the first time, confusion crossed his face. What is that feeling? Root answered without hesitation. Hope. The hunter lowered his hand. He did not attack. He simply turned away. As he disappeared into the pale valley, his final words drifted back upon the wind. It hurts. Naya watched him until he vanished. Then quietly said, Good. Root looked at her, surprised. You wanted him to hurt? No. The keeper smiled sadly. I wanted him to remember enough to know what he has lost. Far above the first forest, the branches of the first tree stirred. One golden leaf drifted silently toward the pale valley, following the hunter, following the last forgotten part of the man he had once been. For even now, the tree refused to stop remembering him. The flame chooses. The oldest fires never roar. They whisper. A roaring fire demands attention. A quiet fire changes lives. It warms the child abandoned by winter. It guides travelers through impossible darkness. It gives weary strangers a reason to sit together long enough to become friends. The first flame had never desired worship. Only purpose. Night settled over the broken range. Clouds gathered around the highest peaks, their bellies heavy with rain. The mountain villages below slowly disappeared beneath blankets of mist. Lanterns glowed warmly behind cottage windows. Families gathered for supper. Stories were exchanged. Children laughed. Ash stood alone. He watched tiny lights appear across the valley until they resembled fallen stars resting upon the earth. They looked peaceful. The first flame answered from somewhere behind him. Pieces built. Never found. Ash turned. The golden figure stood once more beside the ancient forge. Not entirely human. Not entirely fire. Its body shifted constantly between flame and memory, revealing countless faces inside its glowing form. Blacksmiths. Mothers. Teachers. Builders. People whose lives had been spent creating rather than destroying. I don't understand. Ash admitted quietly. You keep showing me ordinary people. The first flame smiled. There are no ordinary people. The forge awakened around them. Hundreds of extinguished furnaces slowly glowed. Not brightly. Patiently. Ash noticed something he had overlooked before. Every furnace bore a different symbol. A loaf of bread. A book. A fishing net. A violin. A seed. A cradle. Not one carried the mark of war. The first flame walked among them. Every civilization chooses what its fire will build. It rested one glowing hand upon a furnace carved with the image of a bridge. Some choose connection. Another marked with an open book. Some choose wisdom. A third bearing the symbol of a harvest. Some choose abundance. Finally, it stopped before the only furnace that remained cold. Its surface had been shattered long ago. Across its broken face was carved a sword. Ash frowned. It was destroyed. No. The first flame replied. It was closed. A deep silence settled across the forge. Ash slowly reached toward the cracked furnace. What happened? The answer came not in words, but in memory. Kings. Councils. Generals. Demanding weapons powerful enough to rule every neighboring kingdom. The master smiths refused. Again and again. Until armies surrounded the forge. The first flame could have burned them all. Instead, it extinguished itself. The furnaces fell silent. The smiths scattered across the world carrying only their knowledge. They chose to lose everything, rather than become servants of conquest. The vision faded. Ash lowered his head. They sacrificed their home. The flame answered softly. To protect everyone else's. A sudden cry echoed through the valley below. Ash looked toward the mountainside. A section of narrow cliff had collapsed. A merchant's wagon hung dangerously over the edge of a ravine. Two horses struggled desperately against tangled harnesses. A frightened child clung to the wagon's broken wheel. Without thinking, Ash ran. Loose stones tumbled beneath his boots. The trail twisted sharply along the mountainside. Another section of earth gave way. The wagon shifted. Wood splintered. The horses screamed. The child cried out. Ash reached them seconds before disaster. He wrapped one arm around the wagon. Impossible. It should have dragged him over the cliff. Instead, the first flame awakened. Golden light spread beneath his skin. The mountain itself answered. The stone beneath his feet grew warm. Not molten. Malleable. Ancient cracks sealed. The earth strengthened beneath him. The cliff stopped collapsing. The horses steadied. The wagon settled safely back onto solid ground. Silence followed. The merchant stared at Ash with wide, disbelieving eyes. The little girl climbed down carefully. She couldn't have been older than 8. Without hesitation, she wrapped both arms around him. Thank you. Ash blinked. No fear. No suspicion. Only gratitude. The first flame glowed warmly beneath his skin. It had chosen correctly. Far away. Root sat beneath the first tree watching dozens of children from her village gather fallen golden leaves. They laughed while pretending each leaf carried secret wishes. One little girl approached Root holding 2 leaves. One for you. Root accepted it with a smile. Thank you. The child tilted her head. My grandmother says trees remember everyone. Root looked toward the enormous trunk rising into the heavens. They try. The child considered this carefully. Then, she held her leaf against her heart. I'll remember them too. Root smiled. The golden thread shimmered gently around her wrist. Perhaps That was how the world had always been saved. Not by heroes alone, but by ordinary people deciding that someone, should be remembered. Far beneath the hollow court, the black mirror rippled violently. The hooded master observed the rescue through its endless darkness. It has chosen compassion again. One of the veiled bowed. The fire-bearer grows stronger. No, the hooded master answered. He grows more dangerous. Another long silence filled the chamber. Finally, the master spoke the words every hunter feared. Send the nameless. Around the black mirror, even the hollow court hesitated. The nameless did not hunt threadbearers. The nameless hunted hope itself. And once it began, entire kingdoms forgot why they had ever believed tomorrow could be better than today. Far above, unaware of the decision that had just been made, Ash looked toward the eastern sky. At that same moment, Root looked west. A single golden thread stretched between two distant horizons. It glowed brighter than it ever had before. The world was slowly remembering itself, and the darkness had finally decided to answer. The nameless. Long before the hollow court had hunters, there had been one. The first. No songs remembered him. No monument carried his likeness. Even the first tree spoke of him only in whispers carried through the oldest roots. Not because he had been the most powerful, because he had become the emptiest. Far beneath the mountains, beyond the black mirror, beyond the chambers where the veiled gathered in silent devotion, a single stone door stood alone. No carvings marked its surface. No handles. No lock. Only smooth black stone that seemed to drink every trace of light. The hooded master approached without haste. The veiled remained far behind. None dared come closer. The master placed one pale hand against the ancient door. It is time. For several moments, nothing happened. Then, the stone sighed. Not with sound. With memory. The door slowly opened. Darkness waited beyond. Not ordinary darkness. A darkness so complete it seemed to swallow thought itself. Something moved. A single footstep echoed across the endless chamber. Another. Another. Until at last, a figure emerged. Tall. Broad. Clothed in robes woven from strips of living shadow. Where a face should have been. Only smooth darkness. No eyes. No mouth. No expression. Nothing. The hooded master lowered its head. Welcome. The figure tilted its head slightly, as though trying to remember what words meant. You have no name. The master continued. You surrendered it willingly. Silence. You have no past. Silence. You have no grief. Silence. You have no fear. At last, the figure answered. Its voice sounded like winter moving through abandoned houses. I have. A pause. Purpose. The hooded master smiled. Yes. Miles away, Root awoke before sunrise. Not from noise. From absence. She sat upright. Something was wrong. The forest had stopped dreaming. For the first time since the thread had chosen her, she could hear nothing beneath the roots. No quiet conversations. No songs. No distant laughter carried by ancient trees. Only silence. A frightened silence. She hurried outside. Mist clung low across the forest floor. Even the birds refused to sing. The first tree stood motionless. Every leaf perfectly still. Naya was already waiting. Her face was pale. What happened? The keeper answered without looking away from the forest. He has awakened. Root felt the golden thread tighten painfully around her wrist. Who? Naya whispered. The one even Kael fears. Far across the continent. Ash felt it too. He had been repairing a shepherd's stone wall when every ember inside the forge suddenly went cold. Not extinguished. Silent. The first flame appeared before him immediately. Its usually warm glow had dimmed. Ash. It had never spoken his name before. He straightened. What is it? The flame looked toward the eastern horizon. Do you trust me? Ash answered without hesitation. Yes. The flame stepped closer. Then, for the first time, placed its hand upon his shoulder. Golden warmth spread through his body. Then prepare. Back in the first forest, Naya led Root toward the Hall of Living Memories. The moment they entered, Root stopped. Hundreds of threads had gone dark. Not broken. Sleeping. What happened? The Nameless passed nearby. Root stared in disbelief. He didn't even come here. He didn't have to. Naya's voice trembled. Hope retreats before him. Root reached toward one dim thread. Nothing happened. She tried another. Still nothing. I can't wake them. No. The keeper replied softly. Because they are waiting. For what? Naya turned toward her. For someone brave enough to believe before there is evidence. Root frowned. I don't understand. You will. At sunset, the Nameless reached the edge of a forgotten village. Children played in the fields. An elderly man carved birds from cedar. Women baked bread. Someone laughed. The Nameless simply walked through the center of the village. No violence. No threats. No words. By morning, the laughter would still exist, but no one would remember why they had laughed. The wooden birds would remain, but their maker would no longer remember why he carved them. Songs would lose their endings. Letters would lose their meaning. Children would stop imagining futures they could not yet see. Nothing would appear broken. Yet everything important would begin quietly disappearing. The Nameless continued walking. He never looked back. That night, Root stood beneath the first tree. Ash stood before the first flame. Neither slept. The golden thread and the first flame glowed brighter than ever before. Not because they had become stronger, because the darkness approaching them had. High above, the stars slowly disappeared behind thick clouds, one by one, until only a single star remained visible above the world. Naya looked toward it. The last star. Root followed her gaze. What does it mean? The keeper answered with quiet certainty. It means hope has decided to stay. Far below. The Nameless stopped walking. For the first time in countless centuries, he looked upward. Toward that lone star. Something stirred within the endless darkness where his heart had once been. Not memory. Not yet. But perhaps. The beginning of the desire to remember. And in the oldest chamber beneath the first tree, the loom of living memories wove one new strand. Thin. Fragile. Golden. It bore no name. Only a single word. Hope. The bridge between souls. There are bridges built from stone. Others from timber. Some span rivers. Others stretch across impossible mountains. The oldest bridge in creation could not be seen. It was woven. Not from rope. Not from iron. But from trust. The golden thread had never intended to connect kingdoms. It connected souls. The first tree had become restless. Its enormous branches, which had stood peacefully for centuries, now moved even when the wind slept. Leaves shimmered constantly with rivers of gold. Birds nested closer to its trunk than ever before. The wolves refused to leave its shadow after sunset. Even the river slowed as they passed beneath its roots. The entire forest understood something Root was only beginning to realize. The world was preparing for a meeting. Root climbed the western ridge before sunrise. It had become her place of quiet. From there she could see endless forests rolling toward distant mountains hidden beneath pale morning mist. She often wondered what lay beyond them. Cities? Deserts? Oceans? Another forest? Or perhaps, the lonely stranger who kept appearing inside her dreams. She smiled despite herself. "What are you doing this morning?" The words escaped into the breeze before she realized she had spoken aloud. The golden thread around her wrist shimmered. Thousands of miles away, Ash stood beside a crystal lake high in the Broken Range. The water reflected snow-covered peaks painted pink by the rising sun. He had begun speaking to the mountains, not because he expected answers, because silence had stopped feeling empty. He skipped a small stone across the lake. It bounced 7 times before disappearing beneath the still surface. "I hope," he laughed softly, "wherever you are, you've stopped looking so serious." The first flame flickered warmly beside him, almost amused. At that exact moment, the golden thread awakened. Not gradually. Instantly. Root felt the world disappear beneath her feet. Ash dropped the piece of cedar he had been carving. The mountains faded. The forest dissolved. Both stood inside a place neither had ever seen. An endless bridge woven from golden light stretched through a sky filled with stars. No beginning. No end. Only light. Only silence. Then, they saw one another. Clearly. For the first time. Root stood frozen. "So," she whispered. "You're real." Ash smiled. "I was hoping you were." She laughed. "I thought I was dreaming." "So did I." Silence settled between them. Not awkward. Comfortable. Like two travelers finally meeting after following different roads toward the same destination. "You have fire," Root said quietly. Ash looked down at the faint golden light moving beneath his skin. "And you have the thread." She nodded. "I don't know what I'm doing." Ash laughed. "You and me both." She studied him carefully. "You don't seem dangerous." His smile faded. "A lot of people disagree." Root answered immediately. "They're wrong." Those 2 simple words struck him harder than any blow ever could. No one had ever judged him before meeting him. No one. Until now. "And you?" Ash asked. "Are you afraid?" Root looked toward the endless bridge beneath their feet. "Every day." She smiled. "I just try not to let fear make my decisions." Ash nodded slowly. "I think that's bravery." She shook her head. "I think bravery is continuing after you've admitted you're scared." For several long moments, neither spoke. The golden thread between them glowed brighter. It was listening. Learning them. Weaving itself around truths freely spoken. Far away, Naya stood beneath the first tree. She closed her eyes. A gentle smile crossed her face. They found one another. Deep beneath the Broken Range, the first flame burned higher than it had in centuries. It begins. Far below the hollow court, the hooded master watched the black mirror. Within its surface, Root and Ash stood together upon the Bridge of Souls. The master's voice remained calm. "They've spoken." Kael stood nearby. "They're still strangers. For now." The hooded master slowly turned toward the endless darkness where the nameless waited. "They cannot be allowed to become friends." Kael lowered his eyes. Because he understood something the hollow court did not. Friendship. was one of the strongest forms of remembrance. The bridge slowly began dissolving. Golden light drifted away like autumn leaves. Root reached forward instinctively. So this is goodbye? Ash smiled gently. I don't think so. She laughed. No. I don't think it is either. The last strands of light faded. The mountains returned. The forest returned. Both found themselves standing exactly where they had been. Alone. Yet not alone. Ash looked toward the eastern horizon. Root looked west. Each carried the same quiet smile. Neither knew the other's name. Neither knew where the other lived. Neither knew what trials awaited them. But both now knew something infinitely more important. Someone else carried the burden. Someone else understood. And somewhere beneath the living roots of the first tree, the loom of living memories quietly wove two separate strands into one. Not because fate demanded it. Because two strangers had chosen kindness before certainty. The oldest magic in the world had never been power. It had always been connection. When hope was tested. Hope is rarely tested when the sun is shining. It is tested when the road disappears. When prayers seem unanswered. When grief becomes heavier than tomorrow. Anyone can believe when miracles are common. The keepers believed. When miracles were nowhere to be found. The first child forgot her mother's song. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. She sat outside her family's cottage braiding wildflowers into a tiny crown. Her mother smiled. Sing with me. The little girl tilted her head. What song? The one we've sung every spring. The child frowned. I don't know it. The smile slowly faded from the mother's face. You've known it since you could speak. The little girl tried. Nothing came. Only silence. Far away. The nameless continued walking. The forgetting spread quietly. Not like plague. Not like war. Like autumn. One leaf. Then another. Until entire branches stood bare. A baker forgot the recipe his grandmother had entrusted to him. A shepherd forgot the path leading safely through the northern hills. An old couple stood before a weathered photograph. We know we love them. The husband whispered. His voice trembled. Can't remember their faces. Root arrived too late to stop the first losses. She walked from cottage to cottage. Listening. Comforting. Holding trembling hands. The golden thread glowed softly beneath her wrist. Yet no miracle restored what had already faded. She knelt beside the little girl. Would you like me to teach you a new song? The child nodded sadly. Root sang quietly. Not an ancient hymn. Not a magical chant. A simple melody her grandmother had hummed while hanging laundry beneath summer skies. The little girl smiled. Then began humming along. Outside, the old oak rustled gently. The golden thread shimmered. One memory had not returned, but a new one had been born. The tree approved. Naya watched from the doorway. You've learned. Root looked up. I didn't heal anything. No. You planted something. Across the continent. Ash faced his own trial. A mining village lay trapped beneath a collapsed mountainside. Dozens remained alive beneath the rock. The survivors begged him to melt the stone. Please, use your fire. Ash looked toward the first flame, then toward the unstable cliff. If he released too much power, the mountain would collapse completely. Everyone would die. The easy answer would destroy them. He closed his eyes, breathed slowly, then placed both palms against the earth. Golden warmth spread gently through the fractured stone. Not enough to shatter it, only enough to soften the narrow cracks. Patiently. One stone moved. Then another. Villagers joined him. Together they carried away the loosened rock. Hour after hour. No miracle. Only courage. Only endurance. Only people refusing to abandon one another. As sunset painted the mountains gold, the final survivor emerged alive. The village erupted in tears. Not celebration. Relief. The first flame whispered, "You did not save them." Ash frowned. "No, you reminded them they could save one another." Far beneath the hollow court, the Nameless knelt before the black mirror. It is slower than expected. The hooded master regarded the swirling darkness. Why? The thread-bearer does not fight with power. The Nameless sounded almost puzzled. She listens. And the fire-bearer? He refuses to stand above those he protects. Silence settled through the chamber. Even the veiled shifted uneasily. The hooded master finally spoke. Then they are becoming exactly what the tree intended. Kael lowered his gaze. For reasons he could not explain. He felt proud. The feeling terrified him. That evening, Root stood beneath the first tree. Ash stood beneath the stars of the broken range. Both closed their eyes. Neither called upon the thread. Neither summoned the flame. They simply listened. Root heard children laughing once more. Ash heard hammers striking anvils as an entire village rebuilt together. The golden thread glowed. The first flame burned. Neither had become stronger through magic. They had become stronger because ordinary people had chosen one another over fear. High above the world, the stars slowly emerged one by one. The first tree stretched its endless branches toward the heavens. Its leaves shimmered like 1,000 tiny lanterns. Naya smiled quietly. The darkness keeps asking how the world survives. She placed one hand upon the ancient bark. It survives. Because goodness is far more stubborn than evil ever imagined. The first tree answered with a warm pulse that traveled through every root, every river, every mountain, and every soul still willing to remember. And somewhere, beyond grief, beyond distance, beyond time itself, the golden thread quietly wove another strand into the tapestry of the world. Not the story of kings, not the story of wars, but the story of ordinary people who refuse to let hope die. The song the forest refused to forget. Every forest has a song. Most people never hear it. They hear leaves rustling, branches swaying, birds greeting the dawn, rain dancing across the canopy. They mistake those sounds for nature. The first forest knew better. Those sounds were its voice. And on this morning, its voice trembled. Before sunrise, Root woke with tears already on her face. She did not know why. Only that someone somewhere had just lost something precious. The feeling settled deep within her chest like a stone dropped into still water. She hurried outside. Mist clung low across the village. No smoke rose from chimneys. No roosters crowed. The silence felt wrong. Not empty. Waiting. The golden thread around her wrist glowed faintly. Not urgently. Sadly. She followed the thread north. Past the old mill. Beyond the fields where children usually gathered wildflowers. Across a narrow stream where deer often stopped to drink. The farther she walked, the quieter the forest became. Then, she heard it. A woman crying. Not loudly. Not dramatically. The quiet, exhausted crying of someone who had run out of tears hours ago. Root stepped into a small clearing. An elderly woman sat beside a weathered gravestone. Fresh flowers rested at its base. She stared at the carved name. "I know," she whispered. "I know I loved you." Her hands trembled. But I can't remember your face. Ruth's heart broke. The forgetting had reached the dead, not their spirits, the memories of those left behind. Without speaking, Ruth sat beside the woman. For a long while, neither of them said anything. The morning breeze stirred gently through the grass. Birds slowly began singing again. Finally, the old woman spoke. People tell me he was my husband. She laughed softly. A broken sound. They say we were married for 52 years. She looked at the stone. I believe them. But I can't remember the sound of his voice. Ruth reached over, took the woman's weathered hand into her own. You don't have to remember everything today. The woman looked toward her. I don't. Ruth smiled gently. No. Love is patient. Sometimes. It waits for memory to find its way home. The golden thread warmed beneath her skin. Not with brilliant light. Not with spectacular magic. Just warmth. Simple. Comforting. The elderly woman closed her eyes. A tear rolled down her cheek. I remember. She whispered. Ruth held her breath. My birthday. She laughed through her tears. He always forgot it. Another pause. Then he'd spend 3 days trying to make up for it. She laughed again. This time, it sounded alive. Only one memory. One tiny memory. Yet it was enough. The first tree shivered. Somewhere beneath its roots, a single dark strand rewove itself into gold. Far across the continent, Ash knelt beside the village blacksmith. The old craftsman stared helplessly at dozens of unfinished tools scattered across his workshop. My hands remember, he murmured. But my mind. He lifted a hammer. I can't remember how to finish them. Ash picked up another hammer. Then teach me what your hands still know. The old man frowned. I don't remember enough. Ash smiled. Let's remember together. Hour after hour they worked. Not perfectly. Mistakes were made. Iron bent the wrong way. Handles cracked. Metal cooled too quickly. Each failure taught them something. By evening, the first farming hoe lay finished upon the workbench. The old blacksmith stared at it. His eyes filled with tears. I made this. Ash shook his head. We made it. The first flame burned brighter. Not because iron had been shaped. Because hope had. Deep within the hollow court, Kael watched the black mirror. He expected to see battles. Displays of power. Instead, he saw Ruth holding an old woman's hand. Ash helping an elderly craftsman remember his trade. He frowned. Why? The hooded master did not answer. Kael spoke again. They're wasting time. They should be preparing. Still. Silence. Kael looked more closely. The thread around Ruth's wrist had grown brighter. The flame beneath Ash's skin steadier. Neither had fought. Neither had conquered. Yet both had become stronger. Something cold stirred inside him. Doubt. The hooded master finally spoke. The tree has always understood. What? Hope spreads. Kael looked away from the mirror. So does forgetting. Yes. The master answered quietly. Which grows faster? Depends upon who reaches the heart first. That night, the first forest sang. Not with words. With wind passing gently through ancient branches. With rivers carrying moonlight toward distant seas. With wolves lifting quiet voices beneath silver stars. Ruth stood beneath the first tree and listened. Far away, Ash sat beside a small campfire and unknowingly hummed the very same melody. A melody neither had ever learned. A melody older than kingdoms. The song of remembering. The first tree had begun teaching them. Not through lessons, not through commands, but through the oldest language life has ever known. Love carried from one heart to another, and somewhere beyond sight, the nameless stopped walking. He listened for only a single heartbeat. A melody he did not recognize stirred within the endless silence that surrounded him. His empty hand slowly closed into a fist. Not in anger. In longing. Some forgotten part of him wanted to remember why the song made him want to cry. When the world remembered. There comes a moment in every age when the future balances upon a choice so small. Most people never realize it happened. History remembers battles. It remembers kings. It remembers the rise and fall of empires. The first tree remembered something else. The morning an old woman smiled because she recalled her husband's laugh. The afternoon a blacksmith finished one more farming tool. The evening a frightened child found the courage to sing again. That was how worlds survived. One remembered heart at a time. The dawn arrived quietly. Golden light spilled across the first forest, painting every leaf with liquid fire. For the first time in many days, the birds began singing before sunrise. Not all of them, just enough. The wolves answered with low, peaceful calls from the distant hills. The rivers resumed their cheerful conversations with polished stones. The forest was breathing again. Ruth stood beneath the first tree. She closed her eyes. The song of remembering flowed through every root beneath her feet. It no longer sounded like thousands of separate voices. It sounded like one endless chorus stretching across centuries. She smiled. I hear you. The first tree answered. Not with words. With warmth. Its bark glowed brighter than ever before. Tiny strands of golden light drifted from its branches, floating across the forest like seeds searching for fertile hearts. Naya joined her quietly. You've changed. Root laughed softly. I still don't know what I'm doing. No. The keeper smiled. But now you know why you're doing it. Root looked toward the endless forest. I thought the thread was meant to save the world. It is. Naya nodded, but not all at once. She pointed toward a tiny sapling growing beside one of the first tree's ancient roots. It began exactly like that, far beyond the mountains. Ash stood before the ancient forge one final time. The first flame burned calmly inside the great furnace. No towering visions. No impossible miracles. Only a steady fire. Ash bowed his head. I think I understand now. The flame shimmered. Tell me. Ash looked toward the valley below. I thought strength meant carrying everything alone. He smiled. It doesn't. The flame burned brighter. I thought power meant changing the world. He shook his head. It means helping the world remember how to change itself. For a long while, the forge remained silent. Then every furnace awakened together. Not in celebration. In agreement. Deep beneath the hollow court, Kael stood alone before the black mirror. The hooded master had departed. The veiled had withdrawn. For the first time in centuries, he was alone with his own thoughts. The mirror rippled. Instead of showing Root, instead of showing Ash, it showed a small wooden bird. His breath caught. A child's laughter echoed faintly through the chamber. Not clearly, just enough. Kael reached toward the image. It vanished. He closed his eyes. My son. The words escaped before he could stop them. He remembered nothing else. Not the boy's face. Not his name. Only one impossible truth. He had once loved someone enough to carve birds from cedar. He fell to his knees. The hollow court had promised him peace. Yet this single fragment of grief felt more alive than 1,000 years of emptiness. Far away, the Nameless stood alone upon an endless plain. The lone golden leaf that had followed him for days finally settled upon his shoulder. He stared at it. The leaf did not burn. It did not glow brightly. It simply remained. Patient. Waiting. He reached toward it. The instant his fingers touched its edge, he heard something. Laughter. A child's laughter. Gone almost immediately. The Nameless slowly looked toward the eastern horizon. His empty chest tightened. He did not understand why. For the first time since surrendering his name, he chose not to continue walking. He simply stood, listening. That evening, the golden thread awakened one last time. Root looked toward the western sky. Ash looked east. The distance between them dissolved. Not completely. Only enough. The bridge of souls appeared once more. This time, neither seemed surprised. Ash smiled first. I hoped I'd see you again. Root laughed. I was beginning to think you imagined me. I tried explaining you to the mountains. And they weren't very helpful. She laughed harder. The sound echoed across the endless bridge. Warm. Unforced. Real. Ash found himself laughing too. For a brief moment. Neither carried the weight of ancient prophecies. Neither thought about hunters. Or darkness. Or the fate of the world. They were simply two young people sharing a laugh beneath impossible stars. Sometimes. That is the strongest kind of hope. The bridge slowly faded. Before it disappeared completely, Root asked, when this is over? Ash tilted his head. Yes. I'd like to know your name. He smiled. So would I. The last strand of light dissolved. The mountains returned. The forest returned. Both stood smiling beneath different skies. High above the world. The first tree released a shower of golden leaves. The first flame answered with a sky filled with glowing embers. For one breathtaking moment, leaves and embers met among the stars. Together, they formed the ancient symbol of the golden thread. Naya looked upward. The first age has begun again. Far below, the hooded master opened the black mirror. Its surface remained perfectly still. Only one sentence appeared. Not spoken. Written. In light. The keepers have found each other. The hooded master's expression did not change. But the darkness behind the mirror moved. Something older than the hollow court had awakened. Something that even the empty had never fully controlled. And somewhere, deep beneath the roots of the first tree, a door that had remained sealed since the dawn of the world unlocked itself. End of episode 3. Ash and Root, the Golden Thread.